I'll ask my question again. They invaded lands that were Christian. They used the reference in the Qur'an about waging war against the Alim al-Kitab as the justification. Were they right or were they wrong?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I need to do more research on that. And even if they did...
No. I mean, do you doubt that they did?
I don't know.
Do you think that they did actions without referencing the Qur'an?
A lot of the empires used the Islamic text to justify the actions, and a lot of them, they benefit society. So, for example, you was talking about the Muslims, and when the Catholics invaded Spain, for example...
No, they liberated Spain.
You say that, but then...
It was a Christian land before the Islamic invasion. Fact.
Yeah, but when the Ottomans were there, okay, the Catholics...
The Ottomans were not in Spain.
In Andalus, yeah, okay, there's Jews
there. There were no Ottomans in Andalusia. It was a Fatimid empire.
Fatimid, okay, sorry, it was Fatimids.
They're Shia, by the way.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is...
You're saying that the hadith about Aisha can't be trusted.
No, I didn't say that.
But the one about Esma can be trusted.
Okay, look,
I'm saying, well, why isn't the one about Esma wrong?
Let me clarify again. So you notice you said it's in Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari.
Yeah.
Both of them have put the same hadith in their books, in their compilations, yeah? And in that hadith, okay, some scholars say that the person who narrated it, which I can't remember her name, she moved to Iraq, and there is some what's it called, doubt in her memory. In fact, that's what they say.
Yeah.
And what other scholars say as well is because of the age of Aisha's sister, who was 10 years older than her, and because of her events, which have many hadiths, not just one, many hadiths about her sister, that's more overwhelming against the 6-year-old, this age of 6 hadith. Okay, now the other point I was going to make, which I think I've forgotten, was yes. So in Islam we've got four ways of getting evidence. We've got the Qur'an, we've got the Sunnah, which is the hadiths.
Yeah, I know that.
We've got Ijma, which is consensus, and then we've got Qiyas, which is comparison. Okay, now what we use Qiyas when there's new issues like cigarettes, cryptocurrency, mortgages. You're not going to get hadith that say mortgages are haram.
But this is the point. This is the point. In terms of a religion that is suited to the world, this is one of the reasons why Christianity is the way to follow. Because in the Christian faith, we're following a deontological sort of mindset. You know what I mean by deontological? No. So deontological means we're not basing our religion and practice on rules. We're basing it on a virtue ethic. And that virtue ethic can apply whether you're an Eskimo in the North Pole, whether you're a pygmy in the Amazon, or whether you're a British banker in London, right? The problem with Islam, one of the reasons why I reject Islam, is because you follow a system of rules, but those rules have already dated, and Muslims are having to reinvent rules.
It's not reinventing.
No, they are. There is no rule about cryptocurrency that you can... Exactly, so you're making it up.
So what we do, we use the original text we have as a source to compare whether or not it comes under, for example, usury, if it comes under gambling. Okay? Do you get my point?
I get what you're saying.
For example, lottery, for example.
So that's making it up?
No, for example, lottery, for example.
In the history of Islam, one of the most sensitive issues is the hadith concerning Aisha's age when she married Muhammad. This account is found mainly in the collections of Bukhari and Muslim and is often regarded as authoritative. Yet, both Muslim scholars and modern researchers have raised questions about the reliability of the chain of transmission, especially concerning Hisham ibn Urwa, who plays a central role. Academic critics, such as Joseph Schacht, have argued that many isnad systems were constructed retrospectively rather than providing direct evidence from the 7th century. This stands in contrast with the Christian tradition, where we possess early manuscripts of the New Testament, like Papyrus P52 or P66, which allow scholars to trace textual variants in a transparent, verifiable way. The difference is clear. Islam relies heavily on oral transmission that was later codified, while Christianity leaves behind written records that can be tested through philology. When it comes to law, Islam developed the concept of qiyas, or analogy. This method links new cases to older principles. Smoking, for example, is connected to the prohibition of self-harm, while cryptocurrency is debated in the framework of usury or gambling. While qiyas allows some flexibility, it is ultimately reactive. It waits for new problems to appear and only then searches for parallels in older texts. History shows similar patterns. When coffee first appeared in the Islamic world in the 16th century, or tobacco in the 17th, both were initially rejected before eventually being accepted under certain conditions. This illustrates how Islamic law must constantly adapt to innovations unknown in Muhammad's time. The limitations become even sharper when we turn to larger modern problems such as industrialization, environmental crises, or nuclear weapons. The Qur'an and Hadith make no explicit reference to factories, pollution, or atomic bombs. Muslim scholars therefore resort to broad principles like la darar wa la dirar, do not harm yourself or others, to evaluate these issues. Yet because such principles are so general, their interpretations often vary, leading to conflicting fatwas across different schools and contexts. In other words, Islamic authority is forced to continually create new rules to remain relevant, which opens the door to inconsistency. Christianity, on the other hand, offers a different approach. From the very beginning, Christian ethics has not been built on rigid legal codes, but on universal moral principles. The teachings of Jesus emphasize love, agape, as the very heart of God's law. In the theological tradition, figures such as Thomas Aquinas developed virtue ethics and natural law. These principles are flexible and can be applied across any era. In the Roman world of the 1st century, during the upheavals of the Industrial Revolution, and even today in the digital age, precisely because it is not tied to a fixed list of rules, Christian ethics carries a vitality that transcends time and culture. The critical question then arises, which more truly reflects the Word of God? A fragile system of rules that must be constantly adjusted to remain relevant, or a moral vision that endures across all ages and cultures?
The lottery doesn't appear in the Quran or in the Hadith,
Yeah.
okay, because the lottery is a new thing,
Yeah.
but we know lottery is gambling while you give money to earn money,
Yeah.
so that comes on the same ruling as when the Quran mentions don't gamble.
Yeah.
Do you get my point? So
Yeah.
that's what the comparison is. It's not inventing new, we just found out that lottery is also gambling, and gambling is
There's
haram.
there's a whole bunch of issues that have absolutely no precedent in ancient history. So, for example, industrialization started in the 1800s, created an environmental crisis. There's no precedent in the 7th century for that. Same with nuclear weapons. No precedent in the 7th century. Muslims who come up with rules about these modern precedents are making it up. It is bid'ah from beginning to end.
No.
So show me where Muhammad talked about weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, how can you expect a book this big to contain information, every single thing? Okay,
So are we agreed that it doesn't talk about weapons of mass destruction?
it won't talk about it directly, but then it'll talk about other things.
So
like, for example,
so give me an example of where it talks about something like a weapon of mass destruction.
what the Quran says, for example, is, to be good to other people, for example, don't kill innocent people, it's like killing all of humankind. So that
It
means
also says that Allah hates the unbeliever and that they're dumb pigs, dumb animals, and pigs and monkeys,
Yeah,
and that you should be hard with the unbeliever.
yeah, that verse
It also says you should wage war against
that
the Alim
verse you're referring
al-Kitab.
to is to the specific ones in that time, because those ones were the ones who were persecuting the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Again, and that's an apologist's
It's not
answer.
apologist, that's what scholars say unanimously.
No.
It's not, because there's some hadith, some ayats in the Quran.
For 1400 years, are you aware that Muslim armies marched into Christian lands,
So did the Christians moved
justifying their invasions, occupations, enslavements and persecutions with the text of the Quran, which says to wage war against the Alim al-Kitab?
Yeah, but the Christians did the same with the slavery.
No, answer my question. Are you aware of that?
That's the thing, Muslims can use the text.
I'll ask you again. Are you aware of it?
Yeah, I'm aware that Muslims use the text. for
Were they
their
wrong
benefit.
to do so?
They're wrong to do so.
So for 1400 years, Muslim scholars have been getting it wrong.
Yeah, but they weren't all doing what you're saying they were doing. There were some groups of
1400
people-
years, every Islamic empire, from the Fatimid, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, I mean, name one, the Ottomans, the Seljuks, like whichever one you want to point to, and ISIS, all invaded Christian lands using the verse about waging war against the Alim al-Kitab as their justification. Were they right or were they wrong?
A lot of the empires that you stated, when they were conquering, for example, after they conquered, like Saladin, he did not tell the Christians you have to be Muslims. He did
That's not
knock
my
down-
question.
Yeah. So
I'll ask my question again. They invaded lands that were Christian. They used the reference in the Quran about waging war against the Alim al-Kitab as the justification. Were they right or were they wrong?
I don't know.
You don't
I need
know.
to do more research on that. And even if they did,
No, I mean, do you doubt that they did?
I don't know. I don't know.
Do you
enough
think
about
that they did actions without referencing the Quran?
A lot of the empires used the Islamic text to justify the actions, and a lot of them, they benefit society. So,
Yeah.
for example, you talk about the Muslims, and when the Catholics invaded Spain, for example,
No, they liberated Spain.
you say that, but then
It was a Christian land before the Islamic invasion. Fact.
Yeah, but when the Ottomans were there, okay, the Catholics.
The Ottomans were not in Spain.
In Indalus, yeah, okay. There's Jews.
There were no Ottomans in Andalusia. It was a Fatimid empire.
Fatimid. Okay, sorry, it was Fatimids.
They're Shia, by the way.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is the Jews, after they wanted to come with the Muslims and escape from the Catholics who invaded Indalus. Okay?
No, Catholics didn't invade Spain. They liberated Spain from an Islamic occupation.
That's your interpretation.
It's a fact of history. Spain, Barak.
Yeah.
Like, me and you are having a nice conversation. Please don't allow trolls to jump into this conversation by giving them your attention. Because that's disrespectful to me and I'm your interlocutor.
Right.
Okay? So please be respectful. I'm not jumping in talking to other people, I'm talking to you. Please do the same. He's just a troll who trolls me every Sunday.
In the history of Islam, certain verses in the Qur'an and Hadith have often been used as a basis to justify violence against Christians and other non-Muslims. For example, Surah At-Tawbah 9:29 commands Muslims to fight against the people of the book until they pay the jizyah in a state of submission. From this emerged the concept of dhimmi, which placed Christians and Jews in a second-class status, obligated to pay a special tax. Classical jurists reinforced this framework by dividing the world into Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb, the realm of Islam and the realm of war, providing theological legitimacy for military expansion. History records that only a few decades after Muhammad's death, Islamic armies were already moving beyond Arabia, conquering Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and Persia. Contemporary accounts from Christian church leaders describe the suffering of communities under these invasions. During the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties, slavery, persecution, and the imposition of the jizyah tax became instruments of control over local Christian populations. These wars and conquests were not driven by politics alone, but were also reinforced by religious texts that offered theological justification. Scholars such as al-Mawardi even wrote that offensive jihad against non-Muslims was a collective duty of the Muslim community. In other words, as long as there remained lands not yet under Muslim control, jihad was considered legitimate. Classical Islamic theology did not merely tolerate expansion, it made it part of the religious obligation. This pattern repeated itself throughout the long history of the caliphates, from the Umayyads and Abbasids to the Seljuks and the Ottomans. It is true that the Christian world also knew war and slavery, but there is a fundamental difference. The New Testament never commands Christians to conquer other nations in the name of God. On the contrary, Christ taught love for one's enemies. The Crusades of the Middle Ages, while tragic, were primarily political reactions to centuries of Islamic expansion, not a theological mandate inherent in the gospel. As we move into the modern era, the same texts continue to be used for justification. Groups like ISIS have explicitly drawn from Quranic verses to legitimize invasions, sexual slavery, and the persecution of minorities. While many moderate Muslims reject such interpretations, the problem remains. The text itself can be, and has been, used to justify violence. This exposes a serious gap between the claim of universal moral values and the actual content of the texts. From an academic perspective, history demonstrates continuity. For over 1,400 years, the Qur'an and Hadith have indeed been invoked to legitimize conquest and oppression. From a Christian apologetic standpoint, the critical question arises: should true revelation really endorse political domination and violence, or should it provide moral principles that are consistent across all times and cultures?